Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid, and today we bring you an encore presentation of one of our very favorite episodes of All Things Heart. Our team is working hard behind the scenes this summer to bring you more amazing stories when our live programming returns in September. However, if there's an urgent update from the health system, we will be here to let you know first. Until then, enjoy this encore presentation and make it a great day. Week after week, Richard Thomas was determined to not give up. And with his medical team's help, he persisted, finally qualifying for a clinical trial. We talk with his cardiology team, the head of the trial, and Richard about how he's doing today. Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid. Welcome back to All Things Heart. Think about all the medications or procedures you or your loved ones have benefited from. Most of them are approved and available to you because of clinical trials. Some of those trials take years and studying countless volunteers before they're available to the rest of us. Today we're talking about a trial here at the health system. It's a procedure to help heart failure patients, and the patient who took part in this is so glad he did. There was a time not long ago that Richard Thomas doubted he'd be able to do this again. Take a simple afternoon walk without doubling over to catch his breath.
And I was down in southern Missouri visiting one of my friends, and I carried a suitcase up, and he said, "Yeah, there's something wrong." He said, you're not breathing right.
So he made an appointment at the VA, a place where the Army veteran first became a patient back in the 1970s when he was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease that causes your immune system to overreact and grow lumps in your lungs and lymph nodes. The VA treated him and he got better. But in 2021, the shortness of breath returned.
I thought probably it had to do with the sarcoidosis, the damage, but so I went to the VA and they did testing.
He was certain they'd find it was related to his bout with sarcoidosis decades earlier, and was stunned to learn it had nothing to do with his lungs. Richard was in heart failure.
My heart wasn't pumping all of the blood out, and so it was backing up.
The VA referred Richard to the cardiology team at the University of Kansas Health System. That's where Richard met Dr. Herrick Shaw and then Dr. Mark Wiley, who told him about a study they were conducting on the effectiveness of a new kind of procedure called the alt flow procedure.
Dr. Wiley said, I think this will help you, but you've got to meet, they've got really strict criteria.
More than a year later, Richard was approved. Dr. Wiley did the procedure, going through Richard's neck and placing a shunt in his heart between the right and left atriums. The goal? Reduce the pressure building in Richard's left atrium. One day after the procedure,
I could immediately feel I could breathe better. A
few months after that, he joined a gym and went hiking in Colorado, and he's lost 20 pounds.
There's no guarantee this is going to last forever. I figured it kind of gave me a new lease on life to do something with it.
We are so delighted to have patient Richard Thomas join us. Thank you for being here, Richard.
You're welcome.
We also have his heart failure and transplantation cardiologist, Dr. Herrick Shaw, and registered nurse, Sophia Rule, and interventional cardiologist, Dr. Mark Wiley. Dr. Wiley is the division chief of cardiovascular medicine and the doctor in charge of the trial. First of all, Richard, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm feeling real well. I'm able to get out and do a little exercise and without much trouble at all.
A little? You've been doing a lot of exercise.
I actually joined the gym, so
yeah.
I've been doing a lot of exercise. I'm trying to get in some kind of shape besides round. So.
You look great. You're looking really good. So is the trial over for you, or do you have to keep coming back for follow-ups and scans?
I went through follow-ups. I had, I think, 3 or 4 right heart catheterizations. I still have some echocardiograms to do, I think, in July is the next one.
July.
Yeah,
that's when you'll be back. Now, Dr. Shaw, you were first told, or Richard was first told, that he had a leaky valve. So how did you discover that wasn't the root cause?
Yeah, so Mr. Thomas, he saw one of my partners first, Dr. Zubair Shah, who then kind of talked to me about his candidacy for the trial. I think initially there was a lot of concerns about his mitral valve regurgitation. The mitral valve is a valve that is directly connected to the left atrium, which we saw in the video. And I think at first there was concerns that he had significant leakage, which can cause a lot of his symptoms. But that valve disease is very dynamic. That valve disease can come and go. And what we found when he came to KU is that that valve disease was not the problem. That valve disease was more mild in nature as opposed to severe. So it did not really explain his symptoms. And so that's why we had to look at other alternatives or other causes in his heart to explain why he was getting so short of breath.
So then how do you make the connection after seeing Richard between Richard and then Dr. Wiley's trial?
Yeah, this is one of the, I would say, one of the biggest frontiers in cardiovascular medicine in terms of how do we treat patients with what we call heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. That is, hearts that are not beating, or beating, their ejection fraction is normal. Their heart is beating normally when you look on an echocardiogram, but their hearts are stiff. For some reason, the hearts don't relax as well. And what can happen in those situations is that when the heart doesn't relax well, pressure builds up in that heart, and that pressure is transmitted directly to the lungs, and that's why people get short of breath. And that's why people can't walk around so much, because that pressure is felt in the lungs, and they can't do anything because their lungs are just full of fluid now. And so this trial is looking at, is there a way to decompress the heart? Is there a way to shunt that blood from the lungs to a different part of the heart so the lungs don't feel that pressure? And so there's very specific criteria that Sophia and Dr. Wiley know about patients that would likely benefit from this trial. And that's why we do a lot of catheterizations to measure the pressures. We got him on an exercise bike with a catheter in his neck to understand what's actually happening in his heart. And there's certain criteria that have to be met, and he met them like beyond, way and above beyond.
Wow.
So I thought he was an excellent candidate for that clinical trial. I met him when I did the first right heart catheterization to see if he was a candidate for the trial, and he kind of met all the criteria very, very well. And so we were excited. Again, this is a clinical trial, so we're still learning if this device is going to actually help patients with this condition. But the data and the hemodynamics showed that he had the heart function that would predispose him to hopefully a good outcome.
So when it comes to the FDA approving this, what's the timeline on that, Dr. Wiley?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, whenever a clinical or device trial starts, or we engage in one, it's typically probably a 3 to 5 year window. So the work that we're doing, and I just want to clarify, Dr. Shaw and I kind of co-lead this study together. So we're partners in crime in this space. But this trial, so we have an early feasibility component, which is, can you do it, is it safe? And then the second phase is it going to benefit people? So we probably have a 3 to 5 year window, I would say, to get this on the market if it's going to be benefiting patients.
Like 3 to 5 years from now, or from
most
a couple years ago? Okay,
yeah.
So it would be a while.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the actual procedure, I'd love to show some visuals to our audience.
Yeah.
Can you explain, again, what makes this so unique, Dr. Wiley?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really a very novel procedure. You know, the device is put in from the side of the neck, and like Dr. Shaw described, you know, the idea is to decompress that left side of the heart so the pressures come down and the lungs don't feel it.
Where do you go through the jugular?
We do, yeah. It's the jugular vein is what people kind of recognize the terminology. So we go from the jugular vein down into the heart. There's a vein that goes around that top chamber, the left atrium, and we use that vein to access the left atrium and then create a shunt, or a little hole, that drains the pressured blood from that left atrium into the right side of the heart.
So then once it's in place, how soon does this device start helping Richard, or how soon did you see the effects on Richard?
It's immediate.
Okay.
You know, so as soon as the shunt is in place, you immediately get a drop in the pressure or a decompression of that left side.
And Sophia, I want to bring you into this discussion, because something that was really stressful for Richard was, he says he spent months trying to get into a trial, figure out what was wrong, the specific requirements. He says you were a godsend. You were right there by his side. I mean, I loved it, because before the program began, we saw Sophia come into the studio and Richard gave her a big hug, and it's just so sweet to see those moments. So what are the specific requirements that he had to meet?
Yeah, it is definitely a long process. It can take anywhere from like 2 to 3 months to complete all the screening tests. So it's a lot of imaging, like an echo, a CT, the exercise right heart cath, also different lab work, so making sure that we have correct measurements and data. So yeah, it's definitely a long process. There's a lot of scheduling, making sure things are within certain windows. But yeah, it's important that we get good data and also making sure that his anatomy is suitable for the device. So.
You talk a lot about Sophia encouraging you.
Yes, we had our walks together.
Yeah, we did.
You took walks together? Tell me about that.
For testing, they have you do like an 8-minute walk.
Yeah, there's a 6-minute walk.
6-minute walk.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she was kind of surprised that, I started out really slow, but then I was able to walk. Once the heart kicked in, I'm like walking. I walk about a half mile, and then I'm fine. But I can't walk up steps. So I was kind of frustrated, and she kept me encouraged.
Yeah.
Do you remember minutes when you sensed Richard was in the weeds and you needed to say something to keep him going?
Yeah, I remember when we first started doing those walk tests, it was a little bit hard to get started at first, but I remember I kept telling you, like, keep going, like, you're doing great, showing up for yourself, and I can see where you're at now, and you've come such a long way, and you're just breezing through those 6-minute walk tests.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Thanks.
How much of an effect did that have on you?
It just gives me a lot more ability to do things that I want to in life, like hiking and going out for walks and actually enjoying the gym. I wouldn't have been able to do that before.
We have an interesting picture that we want to show our viewers, because when we first saw it, we thought, wow, that's huge. Okay, on what you're holding in your right hand, that's a model of the device.
Yeah,
that's in your
thankfully, it is. Yes.
And in the left, that's what it actually looks like?
Yes, it is.
Who gave Richard the model? Where's that from? Where'd you get that?
I actually went out to Edwards Science in Irvine.
Okay, where they make the device.
For the experience,
yeah.
and I spent, my girlfriend and I spent 3 days out there and went through all of the processes, and they showed us exactly how a sample of the device, how it went in and everything, and how the needle went through. And all. So we really got to do, and got to meet the people who actually built it.
It gave you peace of mind, I bet.
Yeah. It'd been nice to have that before.
Right. That's true. So this was after you took a little tour. We have some great questions coming in. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like us to share during the program, just send it to us on YouTube, Facebook, or the All Things Heart email. All the links on how you can connect with us in real time are right there on your screen. Richard, can you tell us a little bit more about what life looked like for you before joining the trial?
I was pretty frustrated because the shortness of the breath. I'm a person who's pretty active. I played racquetball, tennis, any kind of sport I played. I ran 10K races, but this I wasn't able to do anything like just climbing the steps. Like I said earlier, a friend of mine told me that when I walked up the steps, he said, "Your breathing is bad." He said, well, so that's when I went to the VA to find out maybe it was a sarcoidosis, but it wasn't. So.
And did it sneak up on you? Sometimes when you're going through it, you don't realize how bad it is till a friend tells you, hey.
I realized it, but I think I was in denial, more than, because I didn't want that to happen, because I'm a pretty active person.
What's the biggest challenge, Sophia, when it comes to helping patients qualify for trials?
Yeah, I think besides like the scheduling and getting through all the screening tests, I think that the biggest thing is honestly trying to stay like optimistic throughout the process. And sometimes patients don't qualify, but the biggest challenge is taking it step by step and just knowing that you're doing a good thing for yourself, showing up and exploring an option that might benefit you and other people down the road as well. So I think just trying to stay hopeful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much teamwork is involved, and Dr. Wiley, you said you and Dr. Shaw are partners in this trial. Dr. Shaw, how do all the different departments and experts collaborate to make things like this happen for each patient?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's probably the secret sauce when it comes to clinical trials. How do you actually make, and in general, even in just taking care of patients? I think in cardiovascular medicine, nothing exists in silos. We all have diseases that interchange. I would collaborate with Dr. Wiley on valve disease, on clinical trials. All of our specialties kind of in a Venn diagram have some intersections. And so we have to work together as a team in order for this to work out, because there's certain things that Dr. Wiley can do and there's certain things that I can do, and we have to match both of our strengths together in order to help patients. And so there's a tremendous amount of collaboration that occurs in these clinical trials because they scan many different facets of cardiovascular medicine. And then the second aspect is that we need a very strong research team. There's no, you have to have, that is another big component of this. And I mean, mean, Sophia and Jillian and the entire AltFlow team and the entire Cardiovascular Research Institute for Cardiovascular Medicine. Honestly, I have not seen a better institution in terms of actually being able to be so organized in getting these trials. These are highly regulated. They have to be. There's a lot of safety implications here. There's a lot of things we're doing. You know, we're doing trials that haven't been FDA approved yet, but we're looking to get them FDA approved. And so there's a lot of safety checks. There's a lot of organization. There's a lot of scheduling, a lot of putting a lot of pieces together. And so without a strong research team, this is not possible. So I think it's collaboration on multiple fronts, from a clinical side, from a research side, and luckily we have it here, and I'm very happy.
We have KU Med and the health system working together. How many trials are going on at once? Are there dozens of trials in cardiology going on at one time?
Yeah, actually, within cardiovascular medicine, we have a clinical research arm of the department, and we have roughly 70 trials, I believe.
All at once?
That are all actively under enrollment.
So do you all have your finger on the pulse of each trial, so you know when a patient comes in, hey, they might be good for this one, or this woman might be good for this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and each trial kind of has, like, there's heart failure trials, there's interventional trials, there's heart failure and interventional trials like this one. So the research institution and has kind of done a very good job of picking what principal investigators for each trial.
Right.
And so there's a physician kind of being the lead of that trial. So for AltFlow, it's Dr. Wiley and I, because it's a kind of a crossbreed trial.
Got it.
And it's kind of our jobs to really look for the patients and try to find the patients. And then the research team does a really good job screening our patients. That's one of the, the biggest parts of the job is trying to find which patients would benefit. But there's a lot of patients out there. There's a lot of patients who are struggling with cardiovascular disease, and we have a lot of tools. There's a lot of new, cool, very innovative things coming out on the market. So it's exciting that we have access to these, and we can see if these devices can actually help patients. It's
fun to learn about them. So Dr. Wiley, then are you still looking for participants in this trial, or is this trial closed and now it's on to the see what happens phase?
No, yeah, so we are still actively looking for participants for the trial. And a lot of it is really identifying the right patient population. So I do think there's a large population of patients out there that could potentially benefit from this. And there's kind of this entity of shortness of breath that we can't describe because the heart muscle looks normal, but yet they're short of breath and having issues. And so I do think that there are quite a few patients that could potentially benefit from a trial like this.
And so how long do you, for people who aren't familiar with these trials, how long do you keep getting more and more participants before you start studying the results? Like, is there one phase where you get all the participants and the next phase is then tracking them?
Yeah, so it's different parts. So we try to achieve an enrollment target, which is a set number of patients that we think we're going to need to define whether or not there's a benefit from this trial. So we honestly, we don't know if patients are truly going to benefit from this trial until the enrollment's complete and we do the follow-up and then study it.
Okay. So is this something that if someone's here as a cardiology patient at the health system, could they ask their cardiologist about this trial?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's the AltFlow trial. Yep. We have some questions coming in from our community, so I want to be sure to get to those as they come in. Jared wrote to us. He wants to know, did Sophia request to work with clinical trial patients in this area, and how did she get involved with clinical trials?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that during nursing school, there was a huge emphasis on research, and so I always knew I wanted to end up in a field like this. I think it's really interesting to ask a question or a hypothesis and then get to test it and learn new information. So I thought it'd be really interesting to end up somewhere like this. And I had a friend who was also a research coordinator, and I was thrilled to realize that nurses could actually work in research. So that's how I ended up here.
And clearly you're good at it.
No.
Ask Richard. Dr. Wiley and Dr. Shaw said you were amazing. Stuart wants to know, without this device, what would Richard's heart failure progression look like? Would his ejection fraction eventually go down without this device? Who wants to take that question?
I'll go for it.
Okay.
So his entity really is called, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And so again, heart function is, by ejection fraction is normal. There's just a lot of stiffness to the heart. The mortality rate of heart failure with the preserved ejection fraction is not good. When you take a look at the trials and the long amount of patients, we have around 7 to 8 million patients with heart failure. About 50% have this entity called heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. The mortality rate of this condition in 5 years, it's around 75%.
Wow.
It's a very, very morbid and mortal condition. And so that's why, our job as cardiologists is trying to figure out how do we help these patients? How do we, because 5-year survival at 25% is very, 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 very poor. And so, it's our job to really promote these clinical trials and promote these innovations to see if we can actually kind of mitigate the harm that this disease can cause. And so I think I was very happy to hear that Richard wanted to participate in the clinical trial because that's what we need. We need something that will allow us to really help these patients because the burden's only going up. And so we have to figure this out.
Wow. Okay, Dr. Wiley, Amy wants to know, if someone doesn't qualify for a trial, does that mean they're ineligible for the device or drug once it does get FDA approval?
No, not necessarily. So there are a lot of times where there are very strict criteria to enroll in a trial or to qualify, and that's to get the device approved. After the actual trial period, the application is usually a little bit more broad, so it's not quite as constrained. So that a lot of variables are controlled within a device trial by design, but that does not mean that you wouldn't qualify after the fact.
Which is why so many people benefit from these.
Yep.
Ruth Allen has a good question. Ruth wants to know, where does funding come from for these trials?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially kind of in today's political climate.
Yes.
This study is not funded by the NIH. It's not a governmental funded study. It's funded by Edwards, which is a company who's developing and designing this. So this is funded by industry.
Okay. Okay. Stuart wants to know, who pays for the procedure and operating room costs in a trial like this? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Edwards does?
So anything that is considered standard of care is typically covered in a traditional way. Anything that's study related is typically picked up by the trial.
Okay. And then Jeremy wants to know, Sophia, would you know, is there a cost saving on the patient when you do a clinical trial?
There is, once you get to the follow-up period, you do get some reimbursement for travel and for showing up to study visits.
And did you benefit from that a lot?
I actually did not. I mean, for myself, it was something I wanted to do, so I didn't need to. And the VA is paying for the medicine prescriptions I get, so I really didn't request that.
And you live in Topeka, so would you come here every time?
Yes.
When you need the follow-ups? Jared has a question. No, let's go to Patty. Patty wants to know, how did Richard stay so determined to get into the study?
Well, two things. One is Sophia kept encouraging me, but I'm a person who does a lot of research, so I researched it, and I really felt that this was something that would really benefit me. So I think I pushed the doctors also to get me into this program.
Mm-hmm. How much does that help when you've got a patient so motivated, like Richard?
Tremendously.
Yeah.
Has he become like an equal partner in getting involved in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is when the patients are really asking for it, it makes it easier for us to kind of say, let's figure this out.
Jessica wants to know, is it harder to get patients to do clinical trials when they're procedures rather than medications?
I would say yes. I think anytime we think about procedures and going into an operating room or a cath lab table where we're putting devices inside the heart, I mean, the big question is this safe? Is this actually, are we causing harm to the heart? And I think that's always going to be one of the outcomes that we look at in any procedural trial is the safety. Luckily, with UltraFlow so far, the safety has been good, but it's hard to tell someone, hey, we're going to have to go to the cath lab, especially if it's a randomized trial where maybe 50% of the patients have to go to the cath lab and not get anything implanted in them. And so it becomes a lot harder compared to a medicine trial where here's one pill and here's a sugar pill. They look the same. Just you take one or the other. And so medication trials are a lot easier. That's why when you see medication trials, when you take a look at the cardiovascular medicines, 5,000 to 8,000 patients in medicine trials. When you look at device trials, hundreds. Huge contrast between how many patients we can enroll in a medical trial versus how many patients we can enroll in a device trial.
Well, it makes sense because, well, Marty has this question. He writes, I knew there were trials for medications. I didn't know there were actual trials for procedures. And you just answered Marty's question, how common they are. But it makes sense because if you tell me I'm either taking a sugar pill or a regular pill, and then you take me, oh, we're going to go through your jugular, and we're going to, I know it's common speak, but we're going to put in a device or not. That's a lot, sounds a lot more invasive, so to speak.
Exactly.
So these are much less popular, much less enrolled in.
Yeah, I think, and it depends how the trial is designed. You know, luckily for the EFS, which is early feasibility, everyone who got enrolled in the trial got the device. There was no placebo arm. But now the big question with these these trials is that we're doing something to the patient. How do you know it's not the placebo effect? That's why we have placebo-controlled trials. Because when patients think they're getting something, do they actually feel better because of the device, or is it because they know they're actually getting something? And so the hard part for device trials is how do you make a placebo arm? Medicines, it's easy. You just make a pill that doesn't do anything that looks exactly like the other pill. How do you replicate an alt-flow device? And so the second iteration of the trial that we're doing right now is placebo. There's a placebo arm. So that means patients get randomized to either getting the device or not getting the device.
Oh, that's so interesting.
But we need to make sure the patient and the doctor doesn't know that. And so what happens is the patient is blinded. So they go to the cath lab like any patient would to get this device. We actually put the device in, or put the catheters in, and then at that very moment we make a decision, or by the randomization, whether we do it or not. So the patient doesn't know when they leave the table whether they had the device or not.
Oh, that's
and the doctor
so
they see afterwards doesn't know either. And that's the best way to find out, because then the placebo effect will be nullified, and then if patients do better, it'll be because of the device. And that's why device trials are much more difficult. But that's why we have to do it, because we need to know if we're going to do something to a patient's heart, we need to make sure that it's the right thing to do.
Wow, that's so interesting. As we wrap up this discussion, I would love some final thoughts from all of our guests. And Richard, I want to start with you. What do you want people watching to know?
Well, first of all, I was very thankful to get the device and not have to go through a trial and a random blind study. But I would suggest, if you're having issues, work with the medical. Do your own research too. I mean, I'm a big believer in researching, because there's a lot of different things out there, and be informed before you make that decision.
We love patients like Richard, right? Sophia, what would you like our viewers to know?
Yeah, I'd just like them to know that Richard has been such a joy to work with, especially like the research team and Dr. Wiley and Dr. Shaw, and this has just been like a great process to learn from, and I'm just so happy to see that you're feeling better. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Shaw?
Thank you, Richard, for being a participant of this trial. I think it's meant a lot. And I think just in general, I mean, there's so much that we still don't know in cardiovascular medicine, and the only way we can find this out is through clinical trials. And so even though it may sound investigational, that's the only way we know how to get everything that you said in the very beginning, everything that we know now became through clinical trials. And so, it's something that, unfortunately, is something that we have to do in order to figure if things work. And so, please encourage any patients or family members that that it's a good step if we need to find out if we need to be in a clinical trial.
Well, thank goodness we have such amazing doctors and nurses to push this along. Dr. Wiley, what would be your final message?
I would reiterate what Dr. Shaw said. First of all, thank you for participating. And if from my vantage point, over the last 15 to 20 years, we participated in a lot of device trials, and really what we considered standard of care today originated from some of the work similar to what we've done here with Richard. So I do think this is a cornerstone of academic medicine. I'm proud to be a part of the health system and have great partners and great teammates. And really committed to the space. So really appreciate your commitment, and just look forward to the future.
Richard, saving lives by doing stuff like this.
I would hope so.
Yes.